Family, family, welcome to the Moment of Clarity, Lessons in Leadership. I'm Dr. Williams, and today, we're talking about balance. Balance. Listen, balance is so very critical to your leadership success. It's so very critical. And I venture to say this, most leaders that I talk to, most leaders that I work with, most leaders that I may mentor or consult or coach, whether or not they're novice leaders or they're experienced leaders, they either struggle with balance or they have struggled with balance. And see, balance is so critical in our lives. It's just in general that when something in your body is out of balance, you're sick. And we wonder why, as leaders, we're constantly struggling to find our equilibrium. We're constantly struggling to carry the loads that we're supposed to carry. And primarily it happens because we're out of balance. So for the next 10 or 12 minutes or so, I just want to talk about balance in leadership. Because when you are charged with leading other people, you have to be sure that you're taking care of yourself in such a way that it's going to allow those who follow you to be successful. Right? Because you're stewarding something. Now, this is not just leadership on your job. This is also leadership in your family. Maybe you're a basketball or football coach. Whatever you're leading, you're responsible for stewarding whatever or whoever you're leading well. And so if you don't steward them well, if you don't find balance in your life or in your leadership capacity, because we're going to talk about balance in leadership today. If you don't find that balance, if you don't know how to balance yourself as a leader, then you're doing those who follow you a disservice. Let me say that again. If you do not know how to balance yourself as a leader, then you're doing those who follow you a disservice. You're not leading well. And if you plan on leading well, you've got to figure out how to find balance. Listen, effective leaders are balanced leaders. Let me say that again. Effective leaders are balanced leaders. Have you ever worked for someone who was very good at constructive criticism, but they were terrible at giving praise? Right? They were very good at telling you what you did wrong, but they were terrible at praising you when you did something right. Or either they were very good at praising and incentivizing things when you do things right, but they had a problem with accountability. They're out of balance. And each leader, in some way, in some shape, in some form, at some point in our leadership career or capacity, we find ways to be out of balance. And I've worked for leaders that are on both sides of that spectrum. In fact, a lot of times we're that way as parents when we're leading our children. We find extra ways to be overly critical when our children do something wrong, but we don't figure out how to praise them well enough when they do something right. And our leadership in our homes are out of balance because of that. Listen, we have to find that balance. In fact, the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, he talked about that balance, right? He said that there's a time to mourn and a time to be happy. There's a time to sow and a time to reap. Everything he talks about is about balance. And when you're finding yourself in your leadership capacity out of balance, you're leading people in a way that's not going to cause them to be successful for your organization, for your family, for your team. Listen, whatever you want your team to exude or exemplify or master, you must model. Whatever you want your team to exude, exemplify, or master, you must model that. And your team will become a reflection of your leadership capacity. Your team becomes a reflection of your leadership style. If all you do is yell and fuss, your team will just yell and fuss. If you show compassion, your team will show compassion. Listen, whatever you model is what they pick up. In your home, if all you do is fuss at your kids, they're going to become children that become immune to coaching. If all you do is stay out of balance with how you raise your children, then you're creating children who are out of balance. They only know how to respond to one thing. And I see that all the time in sports, right? The kids have been fussed at, even in schools. The kids are fussed at and fussed at and fussed at so much at home that when they come to school and they receive discipline a different kind of way other than fussing, they don't know how to handle it because they've been trained innately out of balance. And so whatever you want your team to exude or to exemplify and to master, you have to model it for them. That's a part of being balanced. See, we often only talk about balance in leadership or in the professional capacity. We often only talk about work-life, home-life balance. And that's probably the biggest one. I will agree with that, but that's not the only one. And that's not the only one that's going to cause you to see dividends and production from your team. Listen, I see a comment. Let me address it. My boy, Tori, I don't know what's going on with my screen. It's not letting me pick up the comment, but I had to learn how to balance my life, energy, emotions, visions, just to name a few. Balance is critical. And listen, a good leader maintains a balance between emotional drive, that's what he just talked about, and sound thinking. I'm going to say that again. A good leader maintains a balance between emotional drive and sound thinking. And so often as leaders, we get so high in our emotions. This is how I want it done. This is how it should be done. This is what's supposed to happen. That we're so emotional that we're not thinking soundly. We do it in our homes as well. We're so emotional. We're so frustrated. We're so upset with whoever that we're not thinking soundly. And we begin to say things that we don't mean in ways that we didn't mean to say it. Listen, you've got to keep something in the chamber when you're trying to be balanced. What do I mean by that? You can't start at level 10 because you can't go anywhere from there. So whenever you're trying to maintain balance as you're leading folk, you have to meet them and you have to offset them at wherever they are. If you're on 100, I'm not coming there. You're going to meet me at 50. And then we can get some things done. That is terribly difficult to do in the moment. But once you understand who you are and you find that balance in your leadership capacity, you actually learn how to confront and have tough conversations in balance. That's why that leader you worked with was very, very good at constructive criticism, but never good at praise, because they didn't find that balance in that conversation. And there's always an opportunity for balance. Let me speed this up. Listen, so there's two things that I want to highlight when you're finding balance in your leadership capacity. There's two things that I want to highlight when you're finding balance in your leadership capacity. Here's the first thing. You have to know your limitations. You've got to know your limitations. You are not capable of doing everything. You are not capable of carrying everything, and you cannot be everything to everyone. Listen, when I was working with a particular leader, I'm not going to say who that person is, but when I was working with him, I tried to instill in him, and I told him, anybody can be led, but everybody can't be led by you, because everybody is not your assignment. And so if everyone is not your assignment, the way I lead folk that I know I'm not assigned to has to be different. I have to know my limitations. And you make better decisions when you know your limits. You make better decisions when you know your limitations. You've got to be aware of that. You got to be aware of your limitations. Listen, awareness creates accuracy. So when I'm aware of what it is I'm supposed to be doing, who I'm supposed to be doing it for, and how I'm supposed to be doing it, then I maintain balance within myself and within my leadership. Listen, limitations protect you from burnout. When you know your limitations, you stop carrying what you weren't meant to hold. Let me say that again. When you know your limitations, you stop carrying what you weren't meant to hold. And so often as leaders, we think it's our responsibility to carry everything. And you can't carry everything and remain effective. And then there are times where you get so good at carrying everything, you get so good at doing the wrong thing that it becomes comfortable. And when it becomes comfortable, it then becomes difficult for you to be as effective as you should be. Because you just see it as this is how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to carry everything. When you're never designed as a leader to carry everything. Limitations help you build better teams. So if I want a balanced team, I have to know my limitations, because my limitations is going to drive who I put on my team. Because those pieces that I put on my team are going to fit cohesively and perfectly together, because they're all bringing something to the table. And that all starts with the leader knowing what they're limited to, knowing what they're good at and what they're not good at. And it also begins and helps you understand how to deal with the members of your team. Listen, on my team, it's a lot of people, but the core of my team is about a good 13 or 14 professionals, right? 13 or 14 educators. And I have to deal with each one of them a different way, because I know my limitations, one, but I know what it is that's going to help them stay balanced. See, with one of them, all I have to do is go by his room every now and then and say, hey, you all right? That does it for him. But there's another one that I have to praise, and I have to make sure that all of his ideas are heard and that I help him get them off the ground. That's the difference. And that's how I keep the team balanced, because I know my limitations and I know their limitations, and I build my team around what our limitations are. So the first thing about being a balanced leader is to know your limitations. Now, how does that work with work life and home life? Listen, you got to know when you need to walk out of that building and get to your family. You got to know that when it's appropriate for you to leave early. You've got to know when it's appropriate for you to stay. You've got to know, and you've got to model that for your team. And I actually struggle in that area. I actually struggle because I always want my team to know that I'm there. And while I'm preaching to them, you need to go be at your daughter's performance. You need to go be at your son's game. You need to leave and go handle that. I often don't do that. And so it's important that you model it. And I struggle with that. And a big part of being a leader is understanding where you struggle, how you struggle, but how you recover and how you work on that struggle, because whatever it is that you model, they pick up. All right. So you know your limitations. And here's the last one. You are willing to adjust. In order to stay balanced, you've got to constantly be adjusting your schedule, your what you like to do, what you have to do. You constantly balancing that. Listen, adjustment is a sign of strength, not instability. Let me say that again. Adjustment is a sign of strength, not instability. You make adjustments based off of the particular environment you're in at that time. And on Monday, it may be different than on Friday. Listen, there's days in the school that I tell people, there are certain days in a school where it's going to be jumping. And it's not the same day for every school, but every school has a day or two during the week where you know this day, when it comes, it's going to be jumping. And you have to adjust on that day. You're not going to be able to get some stuff done that day. Right? You have to make an adjustment mentally. An adjustment is a sign of your strength. It's not a sign of instability. It's a sign that I'm aware enough. And remember, awareness creates accuracy. I'm aware enough to know I need to be here and not there on this day because of my environment. And that's how I remain balanced. Right? You have to master the art of delegation. When you're trying to remain balanced, you have to know what you can take on. But watch this. You have to know who is better on your team to take that project on. Who's better than you? See, if everybody on your team is not has the same skill set that you have, and they do everything the way that you do it, you've got the wrong team together. There are certain people on your team who need to be handling things that you don't need to be handling. And you have to learn how to delegate those things. Balance requires constant recalibration. Balance requires constant recalibration, constantly reflecting on your practices, on your processes, on your procedures, constantly reflecting on those things, and then understanding how to remain balanced. You have to do that almost on a daily basis if you want to remain balanced. And remember, there are consequences for not being balanced in your body. When you've got more red cells or white cells than the other one and they're out of balance, you're sick. When viruses come in and they throw your cell structure out of balance, you get sick. And it happens with leaders every day. When you start taking on too much, when you stop recalibrating and reflecting and you just start operating on Friday the same way you operated on Monday, you get leadership sickness, which is burnout. And you get frustrated and you start making poor decisions and you start saying the wrong things to the wrong people. And you start responding negatively when you could respond positively if you were in balance. Listen, lastly, leaders that adjust stay effective, stay relevant in changing environments. Leaders that adjust. If you're leading the way you led in 95 and 96, you're not effective. I'm sorry. You're just not effective anymore because changing environments happen. Think about coaches. Think about college coaches. Now that you have the portal and the NIL and college players can get paid and they can go from your program to another program, those coaches who just did it their way all of these years, they're retiring now because they don't know how to stay relevant because they're unwilling to adjust. If you're going to be a balanced leader, you got to know your limitations and you've got to be willing to adjust. Listen, balance in leadership is critical to your success. If you're going to be a successful leader in your home, if you're going to be a successful leader on your job, if you're going to be a successful leader as a coach or whatever it is you're doing, you've got to find how to balance everything that you do so that you don't get leadership sickness and burnout. Listen, appreciate you coming into the Leadership Lounge for the Moment of Clarity. Leave me a comment below, whether or not you're on YouTube or Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. And remember, if no one's following you, you're just walking. Until next time.